and welcome to the Service Operations Podcast. I am your host, 𝗖𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗁𝗀. Our guests are from different industries and functions. They will share their experience, strategies, and the changing landscape to help you take the service operations of your business to the next level. Welcome to the podcast, Preeti. Preeti Vyas is the CEO and President of Amar Chitra Katha Publishing House. We'll talk about content and communication in this podcast. Over to you, Preeti. Take us through your work journey and we'll let the conversation flow from there.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me and having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. A little bit about my career journey, and I'll start from the latest role and work my way backwards. Yeah. So currently, as you mentioned, I'm the president and CEO of Amar Chitra Katha Private Limited. I don't think the Amar Chitra Katha name needs much introduction. The whole generation of Indians who have grown up reading these amazing comic books. So the company is 56 years old. We primarily publish under two brand names. One is Amar Chitra Katha itself, which is the comic books on Indian history, mythology, and culture. And second comic brand that we have is called 𝗖𝗂𝗋𝗄𝗃. 𝗖𝗂𝗋 magazine is also now in its 43rd year. And 𝗖𝗂𝗋𝗄𝗃 is more fiction. So you have your favorite characters like Supandi and Chambu and a bunch of new characters as well. So this is the space that we are in. And I've been in the company for about 4 years now, just touching 4 years. I actually joined as the COO in 2019, and I got promoted to CEO by the board in 2020. So that's my latest role. Just before this, I was an entrepreneur. So I was running my own publishing house called 𝗏𝗏𝗶𝗏𝗄𝗏 Publishing India, which created contemporary Indian content for children. So I ran that for 9 years. I continue to run that, so we haven't closed that down. Very fortuitously, we were able to arrive at a very beautiful arrangement where all the content which was created under my company has now been exclusively licensed to Amar Chitra Katha. So it continues to sell and continues to thrive and continues to do well. So that was about 9 years. Before which I used to work with the Future Group, and we set up a chain of bookstores called 𝗍𝗵𝗴𝗏, which was selling books, multimedia, stationery. We had our own publishing, private label publishing as well over there. That was my first sort of foray into publishing as such. Before that, I was at Globus. I have done research and planning there, category management, merchandising. Briefly, for 3 years, I ran my own bookstore, children's bookstore as well. It was called Kids Town, and we sold children's learning products. It's essentially books, but other learning products as well. That was for 3 years. And my first job in India, no, before that was Crossword actually. So Crossword Bookstore is again where I worked for about 2 years. And before that, the first job in India was Sony Music. Sony Music India is where I started my career here. Again with content, so we were the first ones. It was the time when the company had just started, so the first Hindi album, which was A.R. Rahman's Vande Mataram and Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, and all that was released in those times. Before that, I was a student. I studied in Australia after my graduation for 2 years. And when I studied retail management, and when I was studying, I also did a lot of jobs there, as all students do. So right from waitressing at an Indian restaurant to being a academic counselor in my student hostel, to taking tuitions, to working in Toys R Us. So Toys R Us Australia was a part-time job which I did a couple of hours every week. So yeah, a lot of experience in a lot of different companies and different environments, but it's essentially the common threads have been children, have been content, and retail. So these have been the common threads through my career.
Wow, very interesting. So now, when you say common thread, now what could possibly be the common thread between comic books and Pantaloon and the set of people who are your customers or who will deal with these things are different?
So actually, at Future Group, I was also in the books business there. So we had set up the books business from scratch, and we had taken it up to a really good level. So it was still readers who were essentially our customers. But then, of course, it was across the board, so it was all ages. Whereas now we are more focused on, or in my own company also, I was more focused on children as a sector.
So how is it different? How we see as people who go to these stores, what we see is okay. Is it the arrangement of the books? Is it the kind of books that people buy? The bestsellers and now everything seems to be there. So many bestsellers. So I mean, what is your role exactly when you're talking about setting up bookstores, and specifically even let me go back to crossword. Crossword was quite unique in its at a time when we really didn't have bookstores. I think was it one
Yeah.
of the first
One of the
few.
first, one of the first in the kind of format it was, and of course we had like Strand bookstall and stores like that, but those were more small owner-driven stores. But this kind of modern, large, large format store, Crossword was one of the first for Mumbai, but then there were others in other parts of the country.
Crossword, as I see it, is also not, it wasn't just books. It was also got to do that. You could go sit there, you could pick a book, you could read. So that there was a different environment.
Absolutely.
What did you do around that? Was it was it set up by you, or I mean, what exactly was your role in setting up Crossword?
No, so I wasn't involved in setting up Crossword. Crossword was already around for almost I think a decade when I joined. Yeah, it would have been about 8 to 10 years when I had joined. So I was very young at that time. I was just 22. I had just returned. No, it was my second job, so I was probably around 24 at the time. So I have worked my way up basically. So I was an operations manager. I was a store manager. So I had the keys of the store, and my job would start with opening the store in the morning. I was responsible for taking care of the entire team on the floor, so assigning them responsibilities, their sales targets for the day, for the week, for the month, for keeping them motivated, for taking care of them. The entire customer service, customer interaction, customer engagement aspect was something which was my responsibility, because it was operations. I wasn't involved in the merchandising, so I didn't decide what was being sold, but I was involved with the day to day running and the actual interaction with customers. But we did create a few new things when I was there. The team was a very young team along with me, so we had started the children's hour in those days. It was a Sunday morning 1 hour engagement, free engagement for children, where we would do storytelling and we'd have different kind of activities. And in those, of course, now it's very common, but in those days it was not being done. We were the first to do it, and it was a runaway hit and became quite a mainstay to this day. Crossword still has a children's hour where they conduct these kind of events and things.
When you have multiple stores or multiple outlets of a single brand, so what the customer expects is that when they enter into any one of them, they get a similar kind of an experience.
That's right.
How did Crossword manage it, if I might just ask? Because how did y'all ensure that the experience of the customer was the same at every store, or is it not relevant in that area of
So
book?
there's a couple of things. One is that there is a physical aspect to it, right? So when you walk in, the way the store looks should be identical to every other store. So naturally, the fixtures and fittings and furniture remains the same, but also the kind of lighting, the kind of the way things are arranged, the signages, the fonts which are used, all these things are standardized, which gives you a right down to certain like coffee shops or certain stores would also have a standard smell that they use, right? So when you enter a Starbucks store anywhere in India, it will smell the same, because that's the how your senses connect with that experience, right? So whether it's visual, the kind of music that's playing, right? These are very important elements of the customer's experience. So if you look at the way it looks, the way it smells, the way it sounds, the way it feels to touch, the brightness of the lights, all that, and then finally, of course, you have the interaction, which is the most important thing, the interaction with a human being who is there. That's the most tricky part. The rest actually can be standardized very well, right? You can say that this is the air freshener to use, this is the only CD to play, this is, you can standardize all these things. But the human interaction, this is the way we will greet our customers, this is how we will interact with them, this is how we will thank them, this is how we will help them, this is how we will leave them alone, this is how we will not pester them. These are the things that only happen through training, and through continuous training, continuous testing, refresher courses. Also, retail is a sector where there's a lot of churn, right? Because at the entry level, there are very there are young kids, right? And the salaries are also entry level. So today somebody who's earning 8,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees, if another, so they're working in a bookstore, but if Domino's Pizza is offering me or Starbucks is offering me 1,000 rupees more, they will shift. And naturally, that's fine. But as a result, there's a continuous churn. So it's not that you have the same, you might do a fabulous training session in the beginning of the year, but halfway through the year, the whole team is different, right? So it needs to have this continuous, a continuous engagement with the managing the entire experience delivery. So one of the very interesting projects which I had done when I was in the Future Group, actually, in the Big Bazaar Group, we had done a customer experience management program. This is when I was more in the operation before the books business started. On the operation side, we did something called the customer experience management, the CEM program. And in the CEM program, what we did is we mapped out 76 touch points of the customer's experience with our store. From the time the customer chooses to come, enters the parking lot, till the time they actually leave the store, what is their experience? And so we had mapped out 76 touch points, including the parking, the main signage, the staff inside, the way things are arranged, the trial rooms, the cash tills, the trolleys, everything, the tangible, the intangible, the human aspect, all of these were mapped out in 76 touch points. And like you're saying, these were days before things were on so much online. I'm talking of about 2005 or 2006. And we actually hired a research agency which sent in mystery shoppers. So they would go in, and with the training that they had to experience all these 76 touch points. And then they would come out and they would call an IVR helpline, and they would narrate their experience and give ratings on all 76 points. That, yeah, this was a 5, this was a 3, this was a 2. And those 76 touch points were across 6 different areas. So it was like the exteriors, the interiors, the service, all of that. And then we actually had awards, and we had, a lot of competition between the stores. This was run across a 100-store chain. So it was quite a huge exercise, but very, very powerful in the impact it created, because the entire store operations team became very, first of all, conscious that these are the 76 touch points that we have to take care of. This is now a guy will say that, but the location of my store is not something I can control. You guys have opened the store over here, and there is a very crappy experience in parking, and it's not much I can do. And I would say that, well, that's something you've got to live with, right? So that means you have to do even better on the other parameters for you to get over this, because this is impacting the customer's experience of your store. So you'll have to work a little harder on the other points to make sure that your score still matches on the others.
So next time when you open a store, the people who act, the administration people or people who identify store spaces need to take into account. Way I think you're saying that it was done is that the way Singapore Airlines, as we read many case studies, is that they look at the customer experience in that manner, right from the moment customer enters the airport right up till leave. So the span of what they measure is quite big.
Unfortunately, the Singapore Airlines in-flight crew doesn't smile a lot, so that's a big problem for them.
Yeah. So yeah, that may not be a part of the checklist. Aspect of measuring customer experience is I think an art and a science both. And
Absolutely.
what the management actually does with the data that comes to them, and
Yeah.
that's that's also important. In fact, it's more important, I think.
So now, when I look at my current role and in Amar Chitra Katha, the customer experience journey is very different, because now either the customer is buying our books at a physical bookstore, where we don't have control, right? When we are supplying our books to that bookstore, and then they are in turn selling it. So I can, at the most, I can motivate the store team over there by giving them some extra incentives, or maybe giving them free T-shirts, or running a contest for them, giving them good display stands and racks and POS material. But still, it's not my store, right? It's somebody else's store, and there is books from 10 other different publishers, my competitors, which are on the same shelf. So there is we don't have that full sense of control, but we do what we can do. On the online space, when we are selling through our online website, or we are selling through our app, there it's completely my store, it's my storefront. So there, the customer's journey, again, the experience from the customer coming to the site till the time they check out, on the checkout page, how is that experience, and mapping that entire journey, and ensuring that the site loads quickly, there is no glitches, the payment partners are working fast, we had some issues because we received a lot of global international payments as well. If the if you've spent half an hour selecting your books and finally the payment is just glitching, it's going to be terrible, right? You might just abandon the whole cart. So these are the things that we take care of, and it's amazing because sometimes people leave us a tip as well. On my team was just telling me, "Ma'am, where do we account for these tips? Because it's not there in the system anywhere, right?" So because customers are so delighted by the whole experience, and now the third party payment gateways like Razorpay and 𝗖𝗵𝗴𝗃, they all give you a tip option, right? It's the default option. People are giving us tips. So yeah.
And I'm just comparing what you said. So one is, the future group experience that you're talking about, where you're in where you are in direct touch with the customer, or who the customer is, and it's closer. And in the online space also, you know the customer at least virtually, because you know the transaction that has happened and who the person is who's done the
And actually,
transaction.
online space, we know a lot. We know their details. We know which city they are in. We know what age they are. We know what the ages of their kids are. So we know, in fact, a lot more than compared to a retail store in that sense.
In fact, it should be other way around, actually speaking, because when you're meeting a person face to face, you we think that we know more about the person. I think maybe one of the things is that we don't record the data, and that is where we are not able to look at data in a single piece.
Yeah. And the digital medium is so beautiful in a way because, when I'm selling a physical book, right? So suppose you go to a crossword and you buy an Amar Chitra Katha book, or you go to Amazon and buy one of our books, or you go to my own website and buy. It's a physical book, you've taken it home. My transaction for me has ended when you have purchased that book. I have no clue whether you have taken it home and what you have done with it. Have you gifted it to somebody else? Have you read it, or has your child read it? Has your child actually read the whole book or left it halfway? We have no clue. But digitally, when digital reading happens and when people buy a subscription on our app, it is amazing because we know exactly which books they are picking up from the library, which ones they are reading, how much time they are spending, at which point in the book are they dropping off, right? So that gives us feedback for our editorial teams that, look, we are looking at a pattern where people are dropping off at this point. So maybe there is something that's happening in the story. Maybe it's boring. Maybe the visuals are not working. Let's go back and look at it.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. What percentage of your sales is like online in that sense? I mean, if you can share the
So yeah, so now
approximately.
the online sale is also broken up into two parts because the online sale is of physical books. So you're going to an Amazon or you're going to a bookstore, I mean an online site, and your Flipkart or Amazon or our own website and buying a physical copy. The other online buying is digital reading. So you're reading a book on a Kindle app or you're reading the book on a screen essentially. So you're not buying a physical copy, you're just consuming the content on the screen. And so going forward, it's also not just books. So we are a content company, we aren't just a publishing house, right? So that's a key difference. So it's not just books that we are creating. There's video content, there's audio content, there's animation, there's music, there's so much which is already there and so much more which is coming, and the consumer is going to consume all of these different pieces of content across different platforms. For
Okay.
us, the consumer and the customer are different. The customer is a parent, is an adult, because that's the person who's buying it, and the consumer is actually the child.
So how do you learn about the consumer, or how do you teach the customer how to understand the consumer?
Yeah, so that's the challenge because the customer in our case is a parent who is typically grown up on Amar Chitra Katha. So there's a lot of brand awareness is not a problem, right? They already know what it stands for. They know what's there inside the book, and they feel a great love and a lot of confidence with the brand itself. But that does not, so they will buy the book, but that does not mean that the kid is going to enjoy it, right? Because the child is 8 years old in 2023. They have no recollection of any of this legacy and history. My mom has got me something and let me see if I like it or not, and no parent in the world can force a child to complete a book that they don't like. Doesn't happen, right? It's just something you can force them to eat their vegetables, but you can't force them to read a book that they don't like. So that's the challenge for our team, right? That how do we create content which resonates with the child of today, that appeals to their sensibilities, their likes and dislikes, their tastes. I can't expect a kid who's in 2023 who is looking at Disney's Frozen and Marvel Avengers to look at something produced in 1976 and say, now read this. We've got to evolve. So that's one big mission for us as a team, that how do we evolve and create new content which resonates. Then how do we popularize this? So whether it's social media marketing or it's events at schools, How do we go and tell, like really create that awareness? We have a children's council. So we have a bunch of kids across the country. There's about 75 children who are our children's council. So the new books which are going to come out, they get a sneak peek into it. They get a preview. They give us their feedback and their comments. All of this feedback goes back to the editorial team. That's a design intervention, and that can we get it right at the design stage itself.
Wow. So it's like I'm just imagining it's an excellent initiative to have a council of the consumer.
Absolutely.
When we talk customer very loosely, if I might say, because we just say customer, but the point is that the person who is buying is different from the person who's consuming. You're actually taking inputs from the consumer. The end
Yeah.
consumer to see the normally one would have a connection, or one would have can interact with the buyer, because that's the
Yeah.
data you have available. You don't have data anything available with the who is the end consumer of anything.
And in our case, it's multiple. So if a person is buying one copy, we don't know how many people are reading it, right? How many children are there? Could be multiple. So even though digitally we can see that, okay, this book has got 3 lakh reads, but that 3 lakh number, should I divide multiply it by 2.5? Should I multiply it by 3? What is the actual readership? That's the other question. uh, because multiple people are reading it. But in the good thing about us, the content business, the what keeps us all excited and keeps us motivated. Let's see, look at like the best UDP restaurant, for example, which has also been like we've been on for 56 years. Let's take Mani's near Matunga at Ruya College, which has also been there for 56 years, maybe even more. Their menu has not changed, right, in 56 years. Because people want the same thing. They want the idli chutney and they want it to taste the same. That's why they keep going there. So there's not much they can do with the product itself. They can introduce a few new things. They can have some Szechuan dosa or whatever. But those are still going to be on the fringe. Their core is their core. In our case, every book is a new product. Every book is a fresh beginning, right? Every book is a chance to do something new. And we're doing it, like 2 times, 24 times a year is when we're doing it. So that's the difference in the content and the media business, that you don't know which one is going to really take off.
I'm still intrigued as to the kind of books that you publish, the the characters that you have, and the characters that the children follow these days. I've got grandchildren, and every 6 months of whenever we meet them, there's some new character they're talking about. So how do you manage that? Because see, you are within an overall space broadly around Indian culture and mythology and stuff, right? So in that, there limited space, or what do you do differently?
Yeah, so again, Amar Chitra Katha is limited because it's non-fiction, right? So it's not something we have created. The story of Ramayana or the story of Mahatma Gandhi already exists, right? And we are just retelling it. So it's non-fiction. But on Tinkle, it's completely fiction, right? The Tinkle, the stories of Sapandi or Shambhu or Wingstar or Defective Detective, these are all characters made by us, by the company. It's created by us, and the stories are also created by us. So we have enough room on that front to keep on creating new characters as well as new stories. So there are new characters who are like, we have a character called Wingstar, who is a superhero, a female superhero who's 12 years old from the Northeast. Then we have the yoga yodhas, who are martial art fighters who use yoga as one of their powers. And then we have the defective detectives. We have Ina Mina Mainamo, which is a story of 4 sisters. So we have a whole portfolio of characters, and they keep on doing things. And on the history mythology front also, there is, it's an endless universe of Indian stories. There's so much to tell. We have enough to last us another 50 years for sure.
When we talk about content, okay, and there's a lot of communication that happens. So what I'm trying to say is that even like on your website, for example, there's an interaction which is happening, either verbal or non-verbal, and there is even in the normal space outside, these interactions do happen. So what is the role of content? Okay, and content not as in the publishing content, but what is
Yeah.
the role of content in the communication that a company and a customer engage in, say, an email. Okay, when you're writing an email, you make sure that this is how you start, this is what you put in the middle, this is what you put at the end, and that's it. It has to be standardized because you're representing a company. Yet different, yet we want people to use their minds, and then we don't also want them to use their minds, because if they they really write what they want to write, that's not what we should be done. So from a content creator, the world from which you are looking at, what is your view?
So communication to the customer is a different skill set and a different art as compared to creating the content. So the two teams are different, right? So way we look at it is that now for a Britannia or a Cadbury's, you have a product and then you have some content to sell that product, right? Or you have some content to communicate with your customers about that product. In our case, the product itself is content, right? But the team who is the writer who is creating the content for the comic book is not necessarily the right person or the best person to write the copy to sell that content, right? Because the communication and the copy required to sell that content has a totally different purpose, totally different intent. It needs to be SEO friendly, it needs to have the right hashtags in it, it needs to be meta tagged in the correct way, it needs to have the right professional tone to it, it has to be. So that's a different skill set versus communicating the story of 𝗃𝗃𝗵𝗊 in 32 pages in comic book is a different skill set, right? So for a long time we had the same team doing both, and now we've differentiated the two. That the person who's making the product is not necessarily the best person to sell that product. It's just that happens to be that the product is content. Of course, the editorial team is very touchy, so they'll spot a lot of mistakes, and there's a lot of internal wars that break out about typos, or which for them, of course, they see that immediately, that they can spot it. So that's healthy. Yeah, no, that should be. And I keep on saying that the marketing team and the communications team, that look, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard because we're a publishing brand, right? So if it's a Britannia or if it's a Cadbury which messes up on their copy, it's okay. Some agency has written it and people understand that. But a publishing house can't afford to mess up because that's your core content, right? That's your core product.
And is it also because when you're marketing, your marketing is for the customer, and your core content is for the consumer, and they are different. So is
Yeah,
that
yes,
one of
yes.
the
So
reasons?
even the tonality changes. Like in Amar Chitra Katha, we start our emails to customers with Namaste.
Okay.
People like it very much. They get like very warm and fuzzy the minute you say namaste and you start your email with that. But Tinkle, we don't say that. Tinkle is more irreverent, it's fun, it's crazy, it's funny, it's silly. So there we'll just say hi, but Amachita Katha has a brand. It is more sacred, it is more serious, it is more, it's more revered. So we give it that tonality in the way we speak.
I'm asking you these questions because I think we can, in this space of service and in the space of experience and, operations, one can just pick up a thread and, apply it somewhere else. So, it's always very interesting to know what everybody is doing. Do you have customers today who are from West, English speaking, other than Indian?
So our customer base is 95% Indians or people of Indian origin. But in terms of the spread, so about on digitally speaking, about 30% of our users come from the US, in fact. 30% of diaspora, it's the Indian diaspora. So people who have gone and, who want their children to connect with Indian culture. So while in India, a basic subscription would be say 2,000 rupees for the year, in the US we charge up to $149, and they're happy to pay it because they feel that missing connect with their roots. And there's with ACK they have that real trust and confidence, and this is the right way to communicate these stories to my children.
What I'm trying to actually ask you is that you're focused on this space is, because
Yes.
yeah, we quite often see that there are companies who start with one product, and then they just just go on and on and on.
We are not looking at a foreign audience in that sense. I think there is enough. We are the most populous nation in the world now. So there is enough children in India. We're adding in Australia to our population every year. There's no problem. No problem with market size. There's a long way to go before we say we've exhausted the Indian market. And then, of course, the diaspora in every country of the world, you find Indians and passionate about Indian stories and Indian culture. So we are focused on that. Amar Chitra Katha stands for a root to your roots. That's what we stand for. So of course, if there are a lot of stories which do have a crossover appeal, right? For example, we find that in Southeast Asia, so our books have been translated into Mandarin, into Japanese, into Korean, into Thai, into Sinhala, Khmer, yeah, Malaysian, all the multiple because of the connection with Buddhism, because Buddhism spread originated in India and spread to that entire region of the world. Yeah, so Buddhist stories have a great connect over there, and all these books are Jataka tales, and all of these have been translated into all these languages. So they do have a crossover appeal. In Japan, there's a lot of interest for the Ramayana, and they also have interest in Hanuman. So that has a crossover appeal. But that's just like so. Our books are in multiple languages, whether it's French or whether it's Spanish, Portuguese, German, all the major world languages we have our books translated in. But as a company, from an intent perspective, what we create, what we design, it is very much meant for Indian children. From the ages of, from the ages of 8 to 14. Again, adults also read, but still, from an intent perspective, 8 to 14 Indian child is our TG.
Yeah, that I think is very important because important from the sense as managing, scale, as and if you're trying to do everything for everybody, that doesn't work. And you are saying that this is my audience, this is what I do, and I'm going to continue to do that. But we have a lot of companies who want to cater to everybody, and then and normally what happens is everyone operates on an 80-20 principle. We end up doing things for 80% only, but we say we are doing it for all, and then the 20 gets left out in many, especially in the BFSI segment, in banking, insurance, etc. There is this small portion which always keeps getting left out, who should be included. But the day you start thinking, no, I must also, make sure that the books are for older people also who read, then it's
You just
likely
lose
to get
focus,
fragmented.
right? It gets fragmented. And your energy gets scattered.
Yeah.
So we're very grateful and very happy when adults read our books. It makes us very happy to see that. But for us, that's a bonus. That's like the extra jam on top. That's not the
Yeah.
bread and butter.
This part about the transition that of yours from a physical world to the online space. So, how easy was it in the timeline where you were? But how difficult was that transition from physical to this online space? And how do you ensure that there is enough attention to both?
Yeah, so actually, you're right. We actually we were one of the first publishing companies to have our own apps in India. So the ACK app and the Tinkle app were launched way back, I think in 2014 or so. But they were never given much attention or importance in the company either because it was very small. It was languishing. It was there, but it was never like a revenue generator for us. Uh, but when the pandemic happened, so we had about 69,000 users on the app already, on both the apps. So it's a very small number as apps go. But on the 16th of March 2020, we ran a campaign where we offered free access to our apps, just as something for kids who are stuck at home, something for them to do. And the campaign went viral. And in about 3 weeks, we acquired 500,000 new customers. So we went from 69,000 to 5 lakhs in less than 3 weeks, and it was really crazy. And that, the graph just went straight up. Of course, it was a bit, we were concerned that what will happen after this is over. Will we be able to retain these customers? They are freeloaders. Will they pay? Will we convert them? But we have a really amazing digital team, and they were able to retain the customers to a large extent and get them to become paying subscribers. So the digital growth has really happened in the last 3 years. Before that, we were a very print heavy, physical, focused company. And it has been difficult. I won't say it's been easy. It has been difficult because it's legacy. It's a very old company. So while I have my youngest employee is 22, my oldest employee is 63, and that person has been in the company for 30 years. So you've got to be able to balance the culture with all of this and move forward as one unified team, as one unified strategy. So that's been challenging, but it's been great fun because we've seen the results, and success makes everyone happy and motivated to be able to go forward and adapting. So if it's a US, because there's so much business coming from the US, we have a team that works at night because you've got to be able to run your campaigns at that time and interact with customers. Customers have questions, so you can't be sleeping. You've got to be
Yeah.
there at that time.
Okay. Yeah, you have to be
We
when the customers
we do
awake. Yeah.
online workshops, and we do workshops sometimes at 11 p.m. at night because it's US time. So we've done all these things and we continue to innovate. The good thing about our team is the sense of the spirit of open mindedness and innovation, which every member has ingrained in them. So that helps us to keep, and not just digital now. Metaverse is happening. We are looking at AR VR products. We are looking at many different many different platforms where our content can be made available in different forms, and we have to be present in all those.
So two quick questions coming out from what you have said. So one is that how do you bring this, the old and the new together? Because there are many companies who are going through, I mean, there are legacy companies, of course, who've been there for a very long time, and they want to do something, which is more contemporary. And the second question is that when you had 63,000 people using your app, and when it moved to that number, now, how did you manage the sudden sharp increase in load? Because that's like very important in an operational scenario. It's
Oh
like
my God, absolutely.
so. How did so you tell me as a CEO?
Yeah.
I mean, how did you do it for both these things? One is to bring people together, and one is
Yeah.
the
So the
uh,
second part first, I remember this conversation with 𝗍𝗃, who's our digital head, and now remember this conversation thing. I said, 𝗍𝗃, the app should not crash. Okay, everything else is okay. He was like, the books are taking so long to load, and there's so much traffic, and the server is not, able to hold it. We had a third party server as well. I said, forget about the reading, and we had some bells and whistles. I said, you can disable all the other features. It doesn't matter. Just make sure the reading experience is sound, right? And we will promote it as a sharply focused reading app. Uh, it should not crash. That is the only thing, right? We should be able to handle the traffic, and luckily we were able to. So we turned off some things which would not be able to handle the load, and just say focus on the basic, that a customer who is purchasing or coming onto an Amar Chitra Katha app, what is their expectation? They expect to be able to read comic books. So let's just give them that much and do that much really well, rather than say I'll have some music also and I'll have some special effects. All that is not, this is not the time to do it. बाद में करेंगे. When we have money, when things are better, when we're all together in the office, we'll do that. Right now, make sure people can read. That's it. Yeah. And about the team coming together, I think the amazing thing is that they had such a such a sense of open-mindedness. So even though somebody who is like an editor-in-chief at Amar Chitra Katha, she is 63 years old. She's been in the company for almost 30 years. And she's, I said, Reena. So I said, Reena, this is the situation, and we're doing online workshops, and this is one way for us to at least make some revenue. She said, yeah, sure, I'll do it as well. I'll conduct them for you. Right. And not once has she said that, I am the senior most, person in this company, and I've been here for 30 years, and it's not my job to go on an online call and teach some random 10-year-olds how to write a story. Right. And she was well within her right to say that it's not my job. But not once. And then we have Savio Mascarenhas, our group art director, 28 years in the company. He was conducting workshops to teach kids how to draw. Again, he does not need to do that. He can very well say, I'm the group art director. I've worked for 28 years. It's not my job to teach 8-year-olds how to draw. But because the senior team stood up, I was doing sessions myself. I was doing a lot of storytelling sessions. Every day I was doing 2 or 3 sessions. But because the rest of the team saw that the seniors of the company are going out and doing whatever it takes to bring revenues in, everybody came together. So I think you've got to lead from the front. When the senior leadership of the company steps up and really leads and fights in the front, everybody else rallies around. The second part is, of course, transparency. I've been always been trying to be very transparent in the way whether it's a monthly P&L figure, the sales numbers, the expense numbers. We have a monthly family meeting, which is an online. We share everything, right down to the last rupee. So everyone knows exactly where we stand and where the goals are and where we are going, where we are falling short, where we are doing well. We celebrate every smallest thing, and we know, everybody knows.
Companies, when they start, they have a vision, they have a mission, I'm sure. But what really works is the communication of that intent. There's something which is on the board and put up on the walls, but there is something which is communicated, how they should be communicated, other than the fact that you said that lead from the front, you actually start taking action. But there would be some way, some manner in which you would have communicated this to the team.
So I think creating regular forums for interaction, for open interaction and communication, is very, very critical, uh, for people to know that I am an important part of. So we are a small company. We are about 80 members only. So it's not very large. So each of those 80 people need to feel like my job is important, my role. So I always give the example of a jigsaw puzzle. So I said, if you have 1,000 piece jigsaw puzzle and you spend a month putting it together, you can't stop at 999th piece, right? Without that last piece, the puzzle is not complete. So it doesn't matter whether you are the CEO or you are a junior designer, whoever you are, your role is critical to completing that picture. So take that job very seriously because it is that serious.
So teamwork is what you communicate, actually speaking. I mean, you have to work as a single piece. You have to work as a
Absolutely. And
team.
our kind of business is a creative business. So it really is not that, somebody who's been handling a machine for 20 years will become the best at it. It's not like that. A 20-year-old might have a better, brilliant idea than a 50-year-old, right? It's about creativity. It's about what ideas people have and how, or a junior new artist might be much better than somebody who's been drawing for 20 years. So there's no rules about age, number one. So one is we remove this whole thing of age, that somebody is older and hence, so even if it's a person is 62 years old, we don't have any sir ma'am policy, right? All of us address each other by first name. So these are small things in the culture, I think, which make a big difference for people to feel like they belong, for two people to feel comfortable. And there's a culture. That's how culture gets built.
No, that's. I think culture is like the blood of a company.
Yeah, we
That's
don't
what
have
it comes to.
intercoms in the office. We never had intercoms. So you just get up and go and talk to someone if you have a question. Yeah, there's my room is always open for people to come in. I'm always half the time out of my room. So
Before we started our podcast, I had put it on LinkedIn whether anybody wants to ask you any question. And there is one question. You are a publishing company, so you create content and you sell the content. But that content will be bought only if there is a reading habit. So what Shilpa has asked, how do you inculcate a habit of reading books among today's kids glued to their screens? And what is Amar Chitra Katha doing in order to stay relevant to today's modern digitally active audience? So, of course, relevance you already spoke about as to how you have seen the way the characters are. But what about the reading habit?
yeah. So one is very at the very start. I'd like to dispel this urban myth that children are not reading,
Okay,
right? That the reading habit is dying.
but they're
Actually,
reading
it's
on
not.
the screen. They're reading on the
They
screen.
might be reading on a screen, right? But a Kindle, for example, is a safe device. I read on the Kindle a lot myself. I am a voracious reader. I read about 4 books every month, right? 3 to 4 books a month is what I do. Two fiction, two non-fiction, and I read on the Kindle because there is no backlight. It's a safe device for the eyes. It's a focus device. You can't go from the Kindle off to YouTube or anywhere else. It's meant only for that purpose. So the reading habit has not gone. The format will change as it necessarily will keep on evolving, right? 50 years back people heard, or 60 years back people heard music on records. Then the record got replaced by an audio cassette. Then the audio cassette got replaced by a CD player. Now the CD player has been replaced by online streaming. It will keep on changing. That is a way of civilization. That's how we grow. And it does not mean that people are not consuming. In fact, people are consuming more content than ever before, right? Every time you're reading
I
a news
think,
story.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think
So
what. One good point, and I'm just connecting because my daughter keeps complaining her kids don't do it, is this Kindle and phone, or Kindle
Yeah,
and iPad.
the phone is a bad one. The phone is the villain of the piece. Kindle is actually a very safe device. But what we are doing to encourage children to read is, of course, engaging with a lot of schools, engaging with, doing a lot of events. We keep on running workshops to get kids to not only read but also to write, to create, to get them to be in touch with stories. And comic books are essentially anyway a lot of fun. They're not very intimidating. Even for reluctant readers, comic books are fun because it's just 32 pages. You can consume an entire story in about 20 minutes. Yeah, so it gives you that quick satisfaction as compared to reading a very thick novel. So comic books anyway are really good for reluctant readers. For it's non-intimidating, and these days the culture, the in society also is an understanding of the value of books. See, when I was a kid, my parents were voracious readers, but there was limited options. There was one Chanda Mama, and there was Tinkle, and then we used to get those books from the Soviet Union, and then you had some Enid Blytons, and there was a very limited availability. Today, there is an explosion of what's available, and parents have disposable income today. They understand the importance. They are buying more books than ever before. Schools are putting a lot of focus on reading as a habit. My son's school has a DEAR period, DEAR, which is drop everything and read. So, yeah, so every day they'll have a half an hour or 1 hour slot where they're just encouraged to read whatever they want to read, right? But they can't talk to each other, and all they can do is read in that 1 hour. So, smaller schools are having their own literature festivals, like the Neve Lit Fest, which happens in one school. There are multiple Lit Fests like this happening in multiple schools. We are being invited left, right, and center for school Lit Fests. So I think we need to change this perception that that children today are not reading. Maybe some children are not reading, but that does not mean that all children are not reading. And I mean, we've just closed the financial year last week, and we've had almost a 35% growth in sales over pre-pandemic numbers as well. So someone is buying the books for sure, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
but as a parent, what is that one thing if you were to tell a parent today as to how they can inculcate a reading
So
habit?
I can't stop at one because this is my favorite question. So I'm going to give you a few tips. Number one thing I would say is create a reading culture at home, right? So are you reading yourself, right? Because if you're not reading, if you're stuck on the phone and you're expecting your child to read a book, that's not going to happen. Kids learn by watching what the parents are doing, not by listening to them. So you don't be stuck scrolling on your phone and say, go read a book, go read a book. That's not going to work. Create a reading culture, create a reading time in your home where you put the devices off. My son and I do that. We put everything off, put on the AC, put on some, good music, and we read. Of course, now we make him put the music off because it disturbs his own imagination, he says. He says he has some soundtrack running in his head. So anyway, he's quite a character. So, and read yourself is one habit, one important tip. Second tip is to buy books for your children according to their likes and dislikes. Don't force your likes and dislikes that, oh, this is a Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice is a classic book, you must read it. But the child is not interested in it. So give them something that the child is interested in. If your child is interested in football, get him a book about football because that will make him start reading. So number two is to find books on subjects that your children will like. Number three is don't expect your force your child to finish a book they don't like. It's okay to leave a book halfway. Just like you go to a restaurant sometimes and you do leave a dish behind, right? Because you didn't like it. Or you pay a full fee to buy a ticket to a movie. Sometimes you walk out of the interval because it was so bad you don't want to waste your time, right? Watching that movie. So the same applies to books. Just because you bought that book for your child doesn't mean he or she has to like it. So I tell my son that just give it 50 pages at least, like the poor author has spent 2 years writing it. So out of respect for the author's mehnat, you give it 50 pages, but after 50 or 100 pages, if it is still really boring, it's fine. We'll give the book away to someone else. It's okay.
These are, I think, good points. And Preeti, I think we've like we wanted to spend half an hour, but I think it's been a very interesting conversation, really, because you and the best thing is that we can always listen to it again and maybe apply it to so many other areas in which we work.
No, I
So
enjoyed it because nobody's asked me questions about my retail days. So it's been a long time since I spoke about retail and it was fun.
yeah, thank you so much for your time, and we'll connect again.
Thank you so much for having me. All the best.